States, they are realizing some of their regional economic outlook for sub-Saharan Africa. And that's the discussion point that's happening right now. Let's cross on over to the United States and take you to those proceedings for now.
There's also scope for having a monetary exchange rate policy framework that will be supportive of this fiscal stance. So we look for those policies to be adopted to support Nigeria, put this crisis behind it.
Thank you. We go to a little bit different question on the China and Africa angle, and we have a question from Kemi Osuoko from Africa Bazaar magazine. And the question goes about do you think the pandemic will affect China-Africa relations in terms of financing and loans? Thank you.
So I think time will tell how this will play out. My strong sense is that the relations between China and Africa really go a long way back. Are not just financial, but also exchange of know-how, policy advice that China has been providing to countries from the micro. I mean, how to build better bridges and roads to transfer of knowledge that happens when Chinese enterprises open factories in the region. So I think those kind of exchanges are certain to continue going forward. China is the second largest economy. It has historically had very large surpluses that it has needed to invest. And of course, Africa is a very important and attractive business destination. So I think those ties will continue. But will they change, and could they take some time to revive to recent levels? Possibly, but I do over the medium term see those ties continuing and maybe even strengthening.
Thank you. Now we go for a different country, Kenya, and David Herbling from Bloomberg. He is asking about when is a board meeting to consider a Kenya request for emergency funding for COVID-19 is scheduled. And then if we also can add a Simon Otebe question from today's News Africa of any more comments a bit on how the pandemic affecting this country.
So Kenya, we are discussing with the authorities on how we can be of help, and as soon as we are able to finalize those discussions, we are happy to present the case to the board. In recent weeks, we really have been moving requests extremely rapidly. Just to cite one example, in the case of Madagascar, we received a request on March 19, and we had dispersed resources on, by March 4th. So we are moving requests as rapidly as possible. So it's just a matter of having the discussions that we need to have with the Kenyan authorities, and as soon as those are finalized, we can go to the board relatively quickly. The second question was?
It was on the pandemic impact for the Kenyan, but I think you addressed it.
Yes, I mean, I think, again, Kenya, because it relies significantly on tourism, exports, things like flowers to Europe, is going to be impacted, quite sharply, quite adversely by the pandemic. And many of the policy discussions, the policy recommendations that I outlined earlier will be important to strengthen the Kenyan economy's resilience to this crisis.
Thank you. A question on Congo, Brazzaville, from Laura Gardner-Cuesta from Debtwire. And she would like to know the latest related to the Republic of Congo. Have the oil traders and SMPC reached a debt restructuring agreement that is satisfactory to the IMF? And if not, what's the timeline for them? And she just wants updated information on latest IMF and Congo relations there.
So, with the Republic of Congo, we, of course, had agreed on a program and dispersed some funds to support the country. But the debt level needs to be brought back to a sustainable level. And this is not so much to please the IMF, but really to avoid the burden of adjustment falling on the people of Congo. This burden of adjustment needs to be shared by the creditors also who extended those loans. So we are awaiting the outcome of those discussions. And as far as I'm aware, there's been no agreement yet to date.
From the same journalist, a question on South Africa, and she would like to know about the IMF financing discussions is there any financing discussion being held with South African government? Thank you.
there are no discussions on financing with the South African government. South Africa has always had very good international capital market access. Over and above that, though, the country's really big strength is, of course, the fact that it has very deep and liquid domestic capital markets. Relative to most other emerging market countries, actually, it generates its financing need for the government largely domestically and in its own currencies. So that is really a major source of strength that South Africa has. Of course, debt levels have been going up, and the access to international markets right now has been disrupted for a broad swathe of countries. But I think the resilience that South Africa has should see it through a while, subject to policies, of course, being recalibrated to take into account medium-term growth and sustainability considerations as soon as this crisis is behind us.
Thank you. We have a question of IMF assistance and different tools that we are applying there, and it is from Prinesha Naidu, is from Bloomberg News, and he is asking, and thank you for submitting the questions online, he is asking, the IMF will provide 11 billion to 32 countries in the region. Is this part of the 100 billion emergency assistance, and does it include the debt relief announced this week, or is it a separate provision?
So indeed, it is part of the, a lot of the financing that we are providing is through rapid dispersing facility for countries that are IDA eligible. We provide these resources zero interest and repayable over 10 years. And then for countries above that cutoff, also, it's fairly low interest rate. So the 11.5 number that I mentioned is indeed the sum that we're providing through new financing and debt relief to the tune of around $300 million, I believe, for the remainder of this year that were due to be repaid to the fund.
Thank you very much. Still a question on debt from Eleni from CNN International. So she's asking, many countries have issued Eurobonds over the last few years. That debt will be unsustainable. That debt will be unsustainable, she says. What is your message to other bondholders and creditors? While IMF is able to offer debt relief, should other creditors do the same? Are you at all worried about the defaults?
So, debt sustainability, first and foremost, has to be undertaken on a country-by-country basis. It's not, you don't do debt sustainability assessments continent-wide. As well, of course, it really is important to note that this assessment varies from country to country. What is true is that going into the crisis, the region had elevated debt level, and many countries had elevated debt levels, and the crisis, the effect this is going to have on growth, on fiscal accounts, is going to see debt levels rise further for many countries across the region, which is why we were very proactive in indicating that any debt relief that official bilateral creditors could provide will give countries room at this exceptional time to be able to devote resources that would otherwise go to servicing this debt to be devoted to address really pressing health and other spending needs. We're very happy that this has been taken on by the G20 and discussions are underway, and happier still that private sector creditors are also considering such relief to countries that are being most impacted. Again, these are exceptional times. Really, I cannot stress how significant a threat to the region is, as elsewhere, really. So whatever support the international community can provide to give countries room for maneuver at this difficult time, I think is welcome. And it's also with that frame of mind that we have done what we can with the CCRT and the debt relief that we announced earlier this week.